This is a game I've been waiting for a long time. Ever since I saw the announcement trailer for this, I was really excited. I played Hyrule Warriors a ton when it came out, the first one. I wasn't too interested in Age of Calamity. I did buy it, but I only played it for like 10 hours. But the original Hyrule Warriors, I'd say maybe at least 100 hours, 150 maybe. And this game I've spent 100 hours on as well. I also played Fire Emblem Warriors, the previous Fire Emblem Warriors game that came out that was just a cross between all of the Fire Emblem games that had come up previously. And that was really good too, but I didn't play that nearly as much as I've played this. If you think about it, Fire Emblem Warriors Free Hopes should have been the perfect warrior style game. It had everything you needed. It had free factions for you to choose from. It had the conflict between those three factions, it had a story, and you could parody it, which they did do here. And the story changes from the original Free Houses game, which by the way I also played for over 100 hours. It's good. It's good. A lot of the changes aren't things that you would expect, but this is going to be a long enough video without going into further detail, so without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I'm going to talk about the story a little bit here, but I don't want to go into too much detail because the main meat of this game is the story, and I don't want to spoil anything too critical for you. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the beginning, and beyond Chapter 4, we're not really going to talk about the story too much at all. You start the game and it starts very similar to how Free Houses started. You're having a dream, there's this big battle, and then you wake up. When you wake up, you realize you're not playing Byleth in this game. You're playing a character named Shez, or whatever you name this character. Just like Byleth, you can be male or female, and your fellow mercenaries, because that's what you are, a mercenary, tell you that there's going to be a big battle against the Ashen Demon soon and Geralt's mercenaries. Now, if you played the Fire Emblem Free Houses game, this stuff will ring a bell to you immediately, because what you'll realize is Byleth isn't a professor in this game. Byleth is a mercenary, and they never went to the church. That is the very first thing that you'll realize, and the Ashen Demon is Byleth. So you start the game, you do the very first mission, and I'll just cut to the chase how that goes. Doesn't go well. Byleth kills every single person that you know, and when Byleth first approaches you, like, I'll just play it here.
Stand down or die.
But as you can see, Byleth doesn't have any emotion, doesn't really feel anything, which is, pretty normal for being cold like Byleth was at the beginning of Fire Emblem Free Houses. Byleth kills your commander, Byleth kills you, almost, and then at the end, you just collapse. During the collapse here, you meet Arvel, which is essentially your Sophis, but Arvel was very different from Sophis, and I'm not going to get too much into that because spoilers, I don't want to, go into any of that sort of stuff. But Arvel plays a big part in the story. Eventually, you're brought to Garreg-Mach Monastery, and once you're there, Archbishop Rhea decides that you should join one of the classes. You're not joining as a professor, however, this time, you're joining as a student. You have the three options. You can join the Golden Deer, you can join the Dresgian Empire, or you can join the Kingdom of Fargus. This is where you pick the route that you're going to go with. If it was up to me, now that I've done all three of them, I'd probably pick Alliance first. After this, you're going to do a total of 2 chapters. There'll be one mission to do with a conflict in the house you joined, and there'll be one mission to do with some bandits, where you will rescue Monica. Monica, as you may remember from Free Houses, was Kronya, and ended up stabbing Geralt in the back and killing him, no matter what route you picked. But in this game, Monica never disappeared. Well, she did disappear, but she wasn't Kronya. She isn't Kronya. She is actually a person that is incredibly loyal to Edelgard, and she'll become an ally for you if you pick the Black Eagle's house. So your stay in Garreg-Mach Monastery is actually pretty short. I believe the reason for this is because there's so many features in the game that you just don't access until you get out of Garreg-Mach Monastery after Chapter 4. But after you do these 2 missions, the time skip will happen. And when the time skip happens, the very first thing you're going to notice, things are not as they seem. A period of 2 years will happen, not 5 years. Dimitri's hair will not change, he won't have an eye patch and look like Odin. Edelgard will not have the crown that she has. She still has a crown, but she doesn't have her hair the way that she does. None of them have their appearance the way that they do in Fire Emblem Three Houses after the skip. And the clothes they wear is different too. So everything here is completely different. I kind of suspect they're going to add the Free Houses time skip outfits as DLC later down the line, but at least right now that doesn't exist in the game in any capacity. After the time skip, anyone who was going to get a hero's relic, for example Claude's Feanort or Dimitri's Lance, you'll get those things, they'll have them equipped, and the game will make you aware of that. Now earlier I had mentioned that the game needed to kick you out of Garrick Monastery immediately, so that you could access these other features. This is when you're going to start learning about these, from chapter 4, 5, 6, and then beyond. You'll gradually unlock these features, and they're called facilities. The first facility you're going to unlock is the blacksmith, and you also unlock the item shop, but that's less important. The blacksmith will allow you to reforge and forge weapons. You can forge a weapon to either increase its might or its durability. Might is just damage on a weapon and the damage that it will do. As for durability, we'll discuss that in the battle section of the video. At some point after this, you'll unlock the Tactics Master. This is where you go to get increased number of healing items during battle, increased amount of Boreas specials, all of that stuff, empowered crests for characters that have them. All of that stuff is in here. You're going to need to unlock this stuff every time you get a new character. This is going to be a constant expense, and one of the main reasons you're going to want to try to not spend money on upgrading weapons unless you absolutely need to, because any money you spend on upgrading weapons is money you won't have for upgrading heroes relics later down the line when you have more of them, especially ones you're going to want to upgrade. This is probably a good time to talk about the cost involved with the facility manager. Each one of these new facilities that you get will need to be upgraded with both materials that you find on the war map and also a cost involved with it. This is again something else is going to cost. Another facility that you have is the training facility. This fills the same role that it did in Free Houses, where you have training points, you can spend them, and people get experience in the class that they're training in. This is a good way to get experience for classes that you don't want to actually play, but you want either the passive from learning to be a master in that class, such as it's a really good idea to have people go down the assassin route, because not everyone can get it, but once you get, I think it's 2 stars in assassin, you gain something called Despoil, which allows you to get extra gold from killing enemies. Over the course of a playthrough, you'll get a ton of extra gold if you have this passive on, so it's a good idea to collect as many of them as you can for each of your characters. Because I believe even if the AI has this passive on and it kills things, you still get the gold from it. But anyway, this training facility is actually free unless you want to pay to level people up. This is the same system you had in Hyrule Warriors, you had this in the previous Fire Emblem Warriors game too. But this gets very expensive very fast. As you upgrade the facility, this service will be less expensive, but it's still going to cost a ton, especially when you're trying to get to the higher levels. So this is another thing that you're going to want to reserve gold for. I think you're beginning to see the cycle that's going to happen. You'll get gold, and then there'll be things you'll almost immediately want to spend it on. Either you unlock a new character that you want to level up, gold that you want to spend on upgrading your facilities, or you unlock a new character and you'll want to spend it on upgrading their tactics, and for a long time you won't even be able to get all the tactics because they'll be so expensive. So you're definitely going to want to save as much gold as you can. The one thing that you won't be able to cheap out on is seals, however. Seals are what you require in order to advance to the next class. There is a limitation on when you can do this, because you can't get certain seals until certain chapters in the story, but when it becomes available, you're going to want to buy these seals as they pop up. You can also get these seals as battle rewards, and you can also get them from the war map for surveying certain areas. 2 more facilities you'll have access to is the chore facility and the kitchen facility. These both use the same kind of points. The kitchen facility will allow you to cook food, and this food will give you and your entire group, no matter who you pick to eat with, massive buffs. Now at the beginning of the game, these buffs aren't that impactful, but by the end, when you have it fully upgraded, you can get some mega buffs that will allow you to start with 1 full warrior gauge, and part of a second you'll get 3/4 of the awakening gauge. So some of these buffs are pretty impactful, so it's worth upgrading the kitchen facility for that reason. The other facility you can spend these points on is the chore facility. Using the chore facility will get you some support points, but the kitchen facility will do that too. And it'll also get you renown. Renown can be spent on things from your personal quarters, so you're not going to want to spend the renown, and I can't really go too much into why because it's a pretty big spoiler, but if you intend on doing a second playthrough, it's a good idea to bank as much renown as you can, because on the second playthrough there are some pretty good items you can buy from the renown vendor. So you should definitely bank your renown until then if you intend on doing more than one playthrough. If you intend on just doing one playthrough, however, and only doing one route, then don't bother banking your renown, just spend it on items from the renown vendor in your personal quarters. And lastly, we have the supply facility. The supply facility will build up supplies every few battles that you do. This is completely free, and you don't need to pay anything to get these supplies. You just pick them up, the game will make you aware of when it's filled up, and when you have it completely upgraded and everything, it's already free battles, but I believe some of those upgrades make it so you can carry more supplies, so I think it might be every one or every other battle until that point. The supplies you'll get here are ingredients for cooking, materials to upgrade other buildings, and even different materials for weapon upgrades. The other thing you can do with a supply facility, and a big reason you're going to spend a ton of time here late game, is you can trade for smithing stones here. Now why would you want to do that? Well, you can trade the smithing stones for umbral steel, which leads me into the last thing I want to talk about before we go into the battle system. I'll show a little clip here of late game and what upgrading a weapon to completion looks like. Here we have Lascivious Hero Relic that I just obtained towards the very end of the Golden Deer campaign. And the first thing you're going to notice is we are lacking some umbral steel, and you need a ton of it. Since I have all my facilities upgraded, I can just trade the materials I would use to upgrade buildings, because on your second and third playthrough, you will still get these materials, but you won't really need them anymore. So you can either sell them if you need the gold, or you can trade them like I am doing here. And I need to trade a lot of things to get enough materials for this, and when I'm done, I almost have no gold. And this demonstrates perfectly what I've been talking about. You need to save a ton of gold to upgrade hero relics to completion, but if you do it, it's well worth it, I can promise you that. Okay, we've got all the boring stuff out of the way, we can finally talk about the battle system, and I've got a lot to say about this. If you've played any other Warrior games, the previous Fire Emblem Warrior game, Hyrule Warriors, Dynasty Warriors, Samurai Warriors, anything like that, the battle system will be immediately familiar to you. The main difference between this Warrior game and other ones, even the past Fire Emblem Warrior game, is you have arts and magic, similar to what you had in Free Houses. And these are either physical abilities, if they're an art, or magic if you're a spellcaster. These abilities require durability. Durability has no value outside of these abilities. Your weapons will never break, but you will be unable to use your arts or magic if you run out of durability. There are ways to reduce the durability requirement. You can either eat food, which later in the game, as I said, very impactful, and the other way you can get around this is by breaking purple urns. Breaking a purple urn will give you a durability crystal, which will restore your durability on your weapon, but either way the durability on your weapons will restore at the beginning of every battle. As for unit deployment, you can deploy 4 primary units, and these 4 primary units you can swap between freely, and this is the way it is for every single battle, aside from main story missions at the end of a chapter, where you can deploy 8. However, even when you can deploy 8, you can still only control 4. This is where things get really interesting though, because deployment doesn't stop with just you picking the 8 units. Even when you have 8 units, you can still control the other ones, even if not directly. One of the big elements of this game is you're able to tell units to go to certain locations and attack, and the AI is actually pretty good for the most part in doing this. There are also other reasons you'd want to do this. Some characters, like Shez for example, will gain a buff when they're either protecting a target or damaging a target. Shez has a mercenary buff where if Shez is told to go and attack a location when you're not controlling them, they will gain a 50% damage buff. Dimitri, for example, has a buff of 50% that he gains when he's defending a location. These buffs aren't things that you really need to worry about, but they are things that are in play. And the game will teach you about locations and commanding units to attack certain places very early on. Actually, in the very second mission of the game, you learn about this. The reason it teaches you about this so early on is because, especially when you're playing solo, you can't be everywhere at once. And probably the biggest example I can give for this is one of the missions you do in the Empire route. There is a mission, I'll show you a clip of it on screen, but there's a mission where you need to defend Edelgard because she's trying to be assassinated or something. It's not important. Anyway, probably is important, but anyway, you need to defend Edelgard, but you also need to go out and kill the people that are trying to kill Edelgard. You can't do both these things at once. Maybe if you're playing in co-op mode you can. You can't be in two places at once, so you might want to assign some units to defend Edelgard, or you go out yourself and try to find these units that are trying to assassinate her. It's a really good system, and it works really well. But just like any system, it's not perfect. There are some downsides here. First downside, any AI that is attacking a unit will not gain any awakening gauge, they will not gain any warrior gauge, and they won't spend any awakening or warrior gauges either. They will not use any arts, and they will not use any magic. This unfortunately makes the AI completely useless at killing any demonic beast, which are the bosses of this game. This is a problem later on when you fight demonic beasts all the time, and it's something you need to be aware of. If there's a demonic beast, you cannot rely on the AI to kill it. They won't even put a dent in it. There was one point where I was doing one of the later battles in the Empire route. It wasn't a higher difficulty, but all of my people were level 120, so it didn't matter. I assigned every single one of my people to kill a demonic beast while I went across the map and killed the other demonic beast. By the time I was done, I walked over. They hadn't even done 5% of the health of the demonic beast they'd been assigned to. So just keep that in mind. The AI is very good at capturing strongholds, very good at killing lieutenants and commanders, not so good at killing demonic beasts. I wanted to talk about this very briefly. A part of the AI that really falls apart is the escort AI. Sometimes they'll just walk back and forth like this. It's pretty annoying when it happens. And other times, it'll be really bad because you'll be trying to lure an enemy away for a strategy, and one of your allies that you can't control will just keep running in there and dying. Let's talk about the class system now. There are 5 unique classes in this game, and each one of those 5 classes plays unique from anything else in the game. Dimitri has one, Claude has one, Edelgard has one, and I don't know if I want to spoil the other one, but Shez also has one. Each one of these 5 classes have their own playstyle that's different than anything else in the game. Outside of this, people have a preferred class, which is very obvious when you're looking at the class select screen, but their combos will be the same as anyone else who shares that class. For example, you guys know this guy's name, right? He has the same combos as Leone, because they're both a Holy Knight. That may be disappointing to some, because if you're looking for a bunch of unique characters, you're not going to get a roster like that. However, the warrior specials are unique as long as you pick a class that that person prefers. For example, if we look at spellcasters, Happy has a special where she'll summon a demonic beast that'll leap on the enemies in front of her. Lysiphia's special, however, is completely different even though she shares the exact same class. For me, this wasn't a complete deal breaker, but it's definitely an adjustment. Speaking of characters, as you go through the game, you're going to be inclined to just play Shez, which is your main character. And for good reason. Shez is strong, Shez has an amazing warrior special that lets you kill up a bunch of enemies really quick, which if you're looking for S ranks, this is going to be a very easy way to get that. Shez's unique ability also lets you rush around the stage very quickly, which when you're doing extra missions is going to be incredibly valuable, because you'll be able to get to couriers very quickly. It's remarkably easy in this game to become out-leveled if you don't play a character. This is because at the end of every chapter, as you move into the new one, there's a level jump that happens, and it's for this reason that even if you do just play Shez, Having that extra gold to level your characters up in the training facility will solve this problem for you if you fall behind. This is probably a good time to talk about recruiting. In a main scenario battle, you will on occasion get a persuade option as your battle strategy before you begin the battle. This must be done the first time that you do it, meaning if you go to the record master where you replay battles from past chapters, you cannot replay it and then recruit a character. You must do it correctly the first time. It's important to save before every main scenario battle. The game will prompt you for this actually before you do the battle. So if you mess it up, you can just reload your save and do it right the next time. The way to activate the strategy is quite simple. You press right on the D-pad when the game prompts you to do so, and then you have to wait for the game to catch up. Some of the time this will happen right away. Other times you have to wait for all of the characters' voice lines to catch up to where you are in the battle. But once the game prompts you to defeat and recruit or do whatever and recruit, after that, you either kill them and then they become an ally, or on some rare occasions, you'll be required to escort them to a safe location. But if they're not going to become an ally, it'll be evident to you very quickly, mostly because they'll die, and then they won't be an ally, obviously. Just be aware that this has to be done correctly the first time. After you recruit them, they become an ally, and in New Game Plus, they'll keep everything that they gained while they were with you. Good example of this. I worked with Lasifia by recruiting her through the Empire route. Then, when I went to play Golden Deer, she was already level 50 because I played with her when I was the Empire. This, however, is when I should probably talk about the downside of New Game Plus, even though we're not to that section of the video. Any character you recruit, they must be recruited again on a second playthrough. The reason I'm mentioning this here is because this is another reason you're going to feel inclined to play Shez a lot, because Shez will stay with you. No matter how many playthroughs you do, it's going to make sense that you want to focus on Shez, but you're going to want to have a few other strong characters, so make sure you don't neglect your other characters as I said earlier. You can play characters you haven't currently unlocked in record battle, but that's it. This to me was a huge disappointment. I feel like if you had unlocked a character, you should have just been able to play them no matter what, but I understand why they did it this way. This creates an issue though. Once you have finished all 3 routes, you're going to feel like you want to be unrestricted and you just want to play whatever battles you want. You're not really going to have that option unless you're just playing record battles. You also can't access support conversations unless they're part of your current team, but we'll talk more about support conversations later. Next, let's talk about the 4 difficulties in this game. Easy, normal, hard, and then after you beat your first playthrough, maddening. A lot of the issue with difficulty is the way the rewards are structured. Playing on a higher difficulty, the game tells you you'll get better rewards for doing so. What that really means is you'll randomly get level A10 plus weapons, like an Axe of Zoltan plus 10, a Bow of Zoltan plus 10. Almost everything you get on Maddening will be a or B ranked weapon. I think I didn't see anything below that even once on Maddening difficulty when I was going through my 3rd playthrough. The main difference between Maddening difficulty and easy going to either end of the spectrum, the enemies behave in a slightly different way, and obviously they do more damage, but the reason they do more damage is because they're a much higher level. The highest enemies will go on easy, for example, will be 60. The highest enemies I've seen on Maddening is level 180. And when you consider the level cap as 120, that's kind of insane. And that's a paralog battle. Even if you're just going through the story, you're going to end at 150 plus on Maddening difficulty. This basically means that you're going to need some pretty good stuff just to take out enemies. Heroes, relics, plus 100 weapons. This stuff helps a ton. And it's for this reason that you'd think, oh, well, playing on Maddening, you'll get a ton of gold? Nope. The amount of gold you get, I'll actually show you a clip here. I played the same mission on easy, and on easy I killed a ton more enemies than I did on Maddening, and then I played the same mission on Maddening, and the amount of gold that I got for playing on Maddening versus easy is almost identical. And when you consider it takes a lot less effort, and it takes a lot less time to go through a map on easy, if you're just looking to farm gold, playing big, sprawling main story battles with a ton of enemies is definitely what you're going to want to do. In regards to gold though, the way that this is calculated more than anything else is where you are in the story. If you're fighting enemies that are sword masters, for example, instead of mercenaries. I can't be sure if this is exactly how it works, but from my 100 hours of playing the game, that's what I was able to notice. Finally, I want to talk about the story battles, and we're not going to talk about the story itself because we don't want to spoil it for you, but man, is it good. There are battles that lead up to the story battles, and we'll get into that in a minute, but the story battles themselves, they are so good, and they are so varied. Even if you're playing the same mission, but you're playing it from the Empire side instead of the Kingdom, or you're playing it from the Kingdom side instead of the Empire, it's completely different, and the way it plays out will be different because you're playing it from the other side. For this reason, if you're doing a Kingdom route and then you do Empire route, it doesn't feel like you're playing the same story mission even though you might be in the same place. At least story missions don't feel that way. Okay, it took us, what, 26 minutes to get to this point in the video? This is what I anticipated talking about when I was going to make this review. And it isn't the reason I made this review, but do we have something to talk about here? I don't know what book auxiliary battles were taken from, but we're gonna burn it right now. There are battles that require you to go from one location to the next. There are so many of these that you need to do before you get to the end point that lets you do the story battle for that chapter and move the story forward. If these were different, it wouldn't be so bad. But every single one of these auxiliary battles comes down to the same thing. You either need to escort someone to a base and kill a general, you either need to kill a bunch of enemies and then you complete it, or you either need to kill a bunch of enemies and then kill a general, and then you complete it. And there's side missions here too. These are the nodes that you see on the war map, and these are the nodes you need to get in order to survey locations, which you're going to want to do because you're going to need the materials, and you also need to do these because even if you're just saying, okay, well, I'm just going to go straight to the main story, I'm going to ignore all the auxiliary battles, I'm going to make a clear path, I'm not going to do any that I don't have to, yeah, that's not going to work. Because you get 10 strategy points for every single one of these auxiliary battles that you do. So unless you don't have interest in recruiting more people, you're gonna need to do these, which means it might take you up to an hour, maybe longer in some cases based on what difficulty you're playing on, to get to the story mission. That's a huge problem when every single one of these missions is exactly the same. And if just the missions were the same, I could accept that. I could say, okay, the missions are the same. But that's not even just it. The maps are the same. There's this one map where there's a fog covering the area and you need to kill the warlock or the grimoire or whoever it is to get rid of the fog. And I know where that warlock is because the warlock spawns in a few different places, and I've done that same map enough times to know where all those places are. The point that really I found it completely ridiculous is when I'd heard the same voice line repeat over itself twice in a row. I just paused my game and I started laughing. I love this game, I really do. There's so many good things about it that I've talked about up until this point in the video. But auxiliary battles are just a time sink. I understand auxiliary battles need to be in the game. The point of them is to make it feel like your army is moving towards the location. And some chapters there aren't even any auxiliary battles, you just go straight to the main story battle. But sometimes, especially towards late game, you'll load into the chapter, and I'll show a clip here, actually, and you'll just feel the desire to groan, because you'll be like, okay, look at all these battles I need to do before I do the next mission. I just saw a really exciting moment in the story, and now I need to do the same battle 5 times before I continue. Auxiliary battles existed in Free Houses too, so it's not uncommon for them to exist here. I think they could have just toned it down, maybe cut the amount you needed to do in half and it wouldn't have been so bad. I don't think they're bad in theory, but it's just that because every single enemy you kill here is just a basic random guy, for the most part, occasionally you'll fight a story NPC that has something to do with the battle you're going to do, and at that point it makes sense, you know? But when you're just fighting random enemies that have the same generic voice lines, it doesn't feel like you're actually doing anything. It just feels like you're wasting time. Which leads me into the most heartbreaking part of it. The developers knew that. They were aware of it. They were aware of it because on your second playthrough, there's a Vanguard whistle that you can purchase for free renown, which you can very easily have enough of these for the entire game that gives you a D rank completion on a battle, but lets you skip it. And you can skip through the entire game and just keep going to main story battle after main story battle, if you have enough renown to do so, which you gain 10 renown at the end of every chapter and you gain some renown for doing chores. So as long as you do those two things, you have enough renown to just keep skipping through the entire game and doing main story battle after main story battle. They knew that there were too many. That's why they added a skip for it on your second playthrough. It was just a really disappointing way to go. And as disappointing as it is, it doesn't kill the game or anything like that, but the game would have been better off with half the amount of auxiliary battles, or at the very least, a greater variety of them. Around chapter 10, you'll be given a mercenary whistle. This mercenary whistle can be given to any one of your allies who you have an A-rank friendship with. There is no wrong choice who you give it to. However, when you finish the game, you'll get I don't really know how to put this. You'll get a small scene based on who you give it to. So the choice matters a little bit for the story for that reason, but otherwise it doesn't matter who you give it to. Who you give it to, though, will dictate what item you get. You'll get a gift in return for giving it to someone, and that gift will give you their unique ability. So for example, if you give it to Edelgard, you will get her ability in an item that makes all of your attacks become fire. The accessory you get, you won't necessarily want to use because it will override Shez's main ability, which is the dash that you'll use all the time. So you shouldn't put too much value on the accessory, although some of them are pretty good. But there is no wrong choice here.
From the slimy depths of the swamp they rise, great beasties of every shape and size. They dance in a ring and... No, that's not right. Their slime they fling and...
It wouldn't be a Fire Emblem game without supports, and they're here too, even though this is a Warriors game. You can access them through the pause menu when you're in camp, and you can view them from there. You gain supports by either doing anything with them in battle. Grouping up with them is a good way to do that, because then you can do your warrior specials together. You also gain supports by having them be someone you do chores with around the camp, or when you're cooking, you have them be one of the people that you're cooking for. By the end of a playthrough, you should be able to give the mercenary whistle to pretty much anyone you want, as long as you've been doing these tasks around the camp. Now, I'm sure by this point, the big question on your minds: is tea time here, even though this is a Warriors game? Yes, it is. It's not called tea time, however, it's called an expedition. You can, at the beginning, only go to one location, and you need to have a C-rank friendship with the person in order to go anywhere. But once you have everything fully unlocked, there's 4 locations to choose from. From what I can tell, there doesn't really seem to be a difference between going to any one of these locations. But once you're there, it's the same story as it was with Fire Emblem Free Houses. You try to have a perfect conversation. If you don't, kinda sucks. If you do, you're able to observe them for a while, give them a gift. You also get a charm buff both for you and the person you went on the expedition with, and it increases your friendship significantly too. Useful if you're trying to grind friendship so you can give a mercenary whistle to someone you didn't work with. I want to talk a little bit about New Game Plus here. When you go into New Game Plus, the game is going to start exactly like it did previously. You'll do your first chapter, Byleth murders everyone. You do not keep any of your stats. You will go to level 1 in this very first mission, and you will have an Iron Sword. They did this so there's no way you can defeat Byleth. It cannot be done in this first mission. So forget about that. Forget about, going on a revenge spree. It's not happening. In the second mission, you'll get all of your stats. You'll be able to walk over the second mission, third mission, fourth mission. Between the second and the third mission, you'll pick the house you want to go with. If you pick a house that is not going to have characters you previously played with, so let's say for example you had Dimitri at level 120 and you had his lance upgraded and everything, well, you can move where his weapons are even if you can't play him currently. You cannot use him in any battle aside from a record battle. This pretty much makes it so you have to think about the investment on where you're going to spend your gold on your first playthrough. I guess all that's left to do is to talk about the ending. I don't really want to show the ending because that's a spoiler for any of you who haven't seen it yet, but the endings are really good. Golden Deer is by far my favorite ending, but all 3 of them are good. The only complaint I'd have, and this is a minor spoiler, when you finish the game, things are left unresolved. I'm not going to explain what that means. When you play it, you understand. But I understand why they did that, so they could make room for DLC, and make no mistake, there will be DLC for this game. They haven't announced it yet, because the game's been out for 1 month, but I'm sure it's coming. You know what else is coming? The end of this review. If you've stuck around until the very end, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the review. Let me know your feedback and what you thought of this game down below, and have a wonderful day. Take care.